The world had shrunk to the space between ragged breaths. Sergeant Jack Riley's universe was the coppery taste of blood in his mouth, the searing fire in his leg, and the suffocating scent of damp earth. He lay pressed into a shallow ditch, the staccato rhythm of a German machine gun stitching the air above him. His M1 rifle was gone, lost somewhere in the chaotic retreat through the woods bordering the French village of Saint Marie de Bois. The grunts and screams of his platoon had faded, replaced by the chillingly calm chirping of crickets and the distant bark of a dog. He was alone, wounded, a ghost in a foreign land. Darkness bled into the sky, thick and starless. Pain was a rising tide, threatening to pull him under. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to crawl, dragging his mangled leg through mud and fallen leaves. Every movement was an agony, a fresh wave of fire that made his vision swim. He didn't know how long he crawled, only that the silhouette of a stone barn became his single, desperate focus. Just a little further. His strength gave out at the base of the wall. The rough stone scraped his cheek as he slumped against it, his consciousness fraying. Through a haze of pain, he saw a sliver of light appear as a door creaked open. A figure was silhouetted against the warm, flickering lamplight from within. Slender, cautious. A woman's voice, a low, urgent whisper in French. "Qui est là? Who is there?" Jack tried to answer, to say American, but only a pained groan escaped his lips. The silhouette hesitated, a statue of indecision. He could feel the weight of her fear, a palpable thing in the heavy night air. To help him was death. To leave him was what? He closed his eyes, surrendering to the darkness. The last thing he felt was the surprising strength of small hands trying to drag him into the light. Elise Dubois moved with the practiced silence of a hunter. In the cellar of her small cottage, she worked by the dim, sputtering light of a single candle. Her face, framed by waves of dark chestnut hair hastily pinned up, was a mask of concentration. Her brown eyes, usually warm with the patience of the schoolteacher she once was, were now sharp and assessing. She cleaned Jack's wound with a stark efficiency, her hands steady despite the tremor she felt deep in her core. She had lost her parents in a bombing raid on Caen. Her brother, a member of the Maquis, the French resistance, had been captured and executed 6 months ago. Now all she had left was this cottage, a handful of stubborn villagers, and a burning, quiet hatred for the black uniformed men who patrolled their streets. She was a courier for the local resistance network, her knowledge of the surrounding woods and her unassuming presence her greatest weapons. Bringing an American soldier into her home was not just a risk, it was a suicidal act of defiance.
Jack drifted in and out of a feverish dreamscape. He saw flashes of his family's farm in Ohio, the vast open sky, the smell of hay, his mother's smile. Then the images would shatter, replaced by the hellish chaos of the beach landings and the terrified eyes of the boy from Boston who had died beside him. When he finally surfaced to a more solid reality, he found himself staring at a low-beamed ceiling. The fire in his leg had dulled to a throbbing ache. He was lying on a thin mattress covered by a rough woolen blanket. The woman from the barn was sitting on a stool nearby, watching him. "You are awake?" she said in heavily accented formal English. Her voice was softer than he remembered. "Where?" he began, his own voice a dry rasp. "My cellar. You are safe. For now." She passed him a cup of water, her fingers brushing his. Her touch was cool, grounding. "I am Elise. Jack. Sergeant Jack Riley." He struggled to sit up, a wave of dizziness washing over him. "Thank you. You saved my life." "Do not thank me yet," she cautioned, her gaze unwavering. "My saving your life may cost us both of our own. The Boches are everywhere. There's a patrol that passes my door every morning." Her pragmatism was a cold splash of water, extinguishing the flicker of hope in his chest. He saw the grim set of her jaw, the exhaustion etched around her eyes. This was not a damsel in distress. This was a soldier, just like him, fighting a different kind of war.
The days that followed blurred into a clandestine routine. By day, Jack remained hidden in the musty, earth-scented cellar, the sliver of light from a high, barred window his only connection to the outside world. By night, when the village was wrapped in a curfew-enforced silence, Elise would help him up the narrow stone steps to the main room of her cottage. There, by the weak glow of the hearth, she would change his bandage, share what little food she had, a thin vegetable soup, a heel of hard bread, a precious piece of cheese, and they would talk. Their conversations began as a trickle, a cautious exchange of necessities. But as Jack's leg began to heal, the trickle became a current. He told her about Ohio, about the impossible green of the cornfields in summer, and the deafening silence of a winter snowstorm. He spoke of baseball, of jitterbug dances, of the naive belief he'd held that the war was a grand adventure. Elise, in turn, shared pieces of her own fractured world. She described the vibrant festivals the village once held, the taste of her mother's coq au vin, and the joy of teaching children to read. She spoke of poetry, of Ronsard and Verlaine, her voice softening as she recited lines that felt like a prayer for a world that no longer existed. He learned that her quietness was not coldness, but a shield forged in loss.
One evening she was tending to the small herb garden at the back of the cottage when a sudden downpour forced her inside, soaked and shivering. Jack, now able to move with the help of a makeshift crutch, met her at the door with a dry blanket. "You'll catch your death," he murmured, his American directness at odds with her French reserve. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering for a moment longer than necessary. She looked up, raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. In the dim light, he could see the vulnerability she worked so hard to conceal. "In France," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "we all used to the gold." But she did not pull away. In that shared silence, surrounded by the drumming of the rain, something shifted between them. The space that separated their two worlds, the farm boy and the school teacher, the liberator and the survivor, shrank until it was nothing at all. He saw not just a resistance fighter, but a woman who loved poetry. She saw not just a wounded soldier, but a man with kind eyes who spoke of home with a gentle ache in his voice. He began to teach her the slang phrases of his platoon, his clumsy French accent making her laugh, a rare, beautiful sound that lit up the room. She corrected his grammar with a gentle teacher's patience, her fingers tracing the words in an old book. In that hidden cottage, surrounded by a world at war, they carved out a fragile peace, an intimacy built from whispered secrets and shared glances. Love, they discovered, could bloom in the most barren of soils. The fragile peace was shattered by the arrival of SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Richter. He came to Saint Marie de Bois to crush the growing resistance activity in the area, and he brought with him an air of cold, methodical cruelty. He was a tall man with pale, watchful eyes and a smile that never reached them. He requisitioned the mayor's house for his headquarters, and his presence cast a pall of fear over the village. Richter took a particular unsettling interest in Elise. He would stop her in the street, his questions about her well-being layered with insinuation. He complimented her on her Aryan features, his gaze lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "A woman like you, Mademoiselle Dubois," he said one afternoon, blocking her path as she returned from the market, "should not be alone. These are dangerous times." "I manage, Herr Sturmbannführer," Elise replied, her voice level, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Perhaps," Richter mused, tapping his leather gloves against his palm, "but loyalty is a precious commodity. I trust yours is not misplaced." The threat was clear. Back in the cottage, she recounted the conversation to Jack, her composure finally cracking. He saw the fear in her eyes, and it stoked a white-hot rage within him. He was a soldier, trained to fight. And yet here he was, hiding in a cellar, useless, while the woman he was coming to love was being threatened by a monster.
"I should leave," he said, his voice tight. "I'm putting you in danger. If he finds me here—" "And where would you go?" Elise countered, her fear transmuting into fierce determination. "You barely can walk. You'd be captured within an hour. No, you stay. We will be more careful." But the net was tightening. Richter's men began conducting random house-to-house searches, their methods brutal and thorough. The whispers in the village grew more fearful. A farmer on the outskirts was shot for hoarding a pig. The baker was arrested, accused of passing information to the Maquis. The war was no longer at the doorstep. It was in the house, a constant menacing presence.
The knock came at dusk. Not the coded tap of a resistance contact, but the heavy, authoritative slam of a rifle butt against the door. "Öffnen! Open up!" Elise's blood ran cold. "The cellar!" she hissed at Jack, her eyes wide with terror. "Now!" He moved as quickly as he could, his legs screaming in protest. Elise shoved him towards the trapdoor hidden under a rug, her hands trembling. "There's a small space behind the wine racks. Do not make a sound, whatever you hear." He squeezed into the cramped, dark cavity, the smell of earth and rotting wood filling his lungs. He heard Elise pull the rug back into place just as the cottage door splintered open. German voices, harsh and guttural, filled the room above him. He could hear them searching for contraband. "We are searching for contraband, mademoiselle. We have reports of subversive activities." "There is nothing here," Elise's voice replied, remarkably steady. "We shall be the judge of that." Jack's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was his fault. His presence had brought this nightmare upon her. He pictured her up there, alone, facing them, and a wave of helpless fury washed over him. He was a soldier, yet he was cowering in a hole while she protected him. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. He heard their heavy boots on the floorboards directly above the cellar door. A soldier grunted something about checking below. Jack's breath hitched. It was over. "There is nothing down there but spiders and bad wine," Richter said with a dismissive laugh. "I am more interested in what is up here." The boots moved away. The search continued for an eternity, every scrape and bang a fresh torment for Jack. Finally, the soldiers left. He waited, listening, until he heard Elise's faint, shaky voice. Elise, you're safe? Jack, they are gone." When he emerged, he found her sitting at the table, her head in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. The cottage was in ruins, a testament to the brutal violation. He went to her, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly as the carefully constructed walls of her composure crumbled. In that moment of shared terror and relief, their love, forged in whispers, was sealed in the stark reality of their shared peril. They were no longer just a man and a woman. They were two souls clinging to each other in a storm, their survival inextricably linked. The stakes had never been higher. News came through the network. A German munitions train was scheduled to pass near Saint Marie de Bois in 2 nights. It was a critical target. Elise was tasked with relaying the final confirmation to the Maquis unit hiding in the forest. Jack, his leg now strong enough for a sustained fight, saw his chance. "I'm going with you," he declared. It wasn't a request. "It is not your fight, Jack," Elise argued, though her protest was weak. "You are my fight," he said simply, his blue eyes locking with hers. "I will not hide anymore." The night of the mission was moonless and cold. They moved through the woods like wraiths, Jack's soldierly instincts and Elise's intimate knowledge of the terrain a perfect combination. They reached the rendezvous point, a dilapidated hunting cabin, and delivered the message. But as they prepared to return, the sound of approaching vehicles sent them diving for cover. It was Richter. He and a squad of his men were sweeping the woods. A plan was hatched in desperate whispers. The Maquis would proceed with the ambush on the train tracks, creating a major diversion.
Jack and Elise would use the chaos to slip back to the village. The explosion that derailed the train ripped the night apart, a volcanic eruption of fire and sound. In the ensuing chaos, Jack and Elise ran. But their luck ran out at the edge of the village. Richter, cutting off their escape route, cornered them in the town square. His face was demonic in the flickering light of the distant fire. "The loyal Mademoiselle Dubois," he sneered, raising his Luger, "and her little American pet. I knew you were hiding something." He aimed the pistol at Elise. Time seemed to stop. Jack didn't think, he acted. With a roar of pure rage, he launched himself at Richter, using his crutch as a club. The German was taken by surprise, but he was strong. They crashed to the ground, a desperate tangle of limbs. Jack's world narrowed to the fight for the gun, his hands locked on Richter's wrist. The German's cold eyes were filled with murderous intent. He was stronger, pushing the barrel of the Luger towards Jack's chest. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Not from the Luger, but from the shadows. Richter's body went rigid, a look of shock on his face before he slumped onto Jack. One of the McKee fighters, sent back to ensure their safety, stood in the alleyway, his rifle smoking. The next dawn brought not the sound of German patrols, but the rumble of Allied tanks. Saint Marie de Bois was liberated. The villagers poured into the streets, weeping and cheering, waving makeshift French and American flags. It was a dreamlike scene of impossible joy. Amidst the celebration, Jack found Elise near the old stone church. The reality of their situation settled upon them. He was a soldier. His war wasn't over. He had to report back to his unit. "You'll go?" she asked, her voice quiet, the joy of liberation already tinged with the sorrow of departure. "I have to," he said, taking her hands in his. "But this isn't the end. When it's over, I'll find you. I swear it. I'll come back to Saint Marie de Bois. I'll come back to you." He pulled a small, worn photograph from his pocket, a picture of his family's farm in Ohio. "So you don't forget me," he said, placing it in her hand. She gave him a small, tattered book of Verlaine's poetry. "And you, do not forget me." Their kiss was desperate and deep, a frantic attempt to convey all the words they didn't have time to say. It was a promise of a future in a world that was, for the first time in a long time, beginning to feel possible. As he climbed into the back of an American Army truck, he kept his eyes on her until she was just a small figure in a celebrating crowd, a solitary beacon of hope in a world reborn from the ashes of war. The truck rumbled on, carrying him to the next battle. But his heart remained behind, in a small French cottage, with the woman who had shown him that even in the deepest darkness, light and love could find a way to endure.